Two DL 1000 clutch baskets. This is a 2018 to 2019 production model. This is one of the new 2020 DL 1050 clutch baskets. This one has a 21231Y11 part number. This is the 31Y20. They appear identical. I've measured the hub inner diameter and outer diameters. That's all identical. Same stamping number on the top plate, 06G02. Same casting number inside, the 05G37. Small print with the number 2 after it. That's all identical. From looking at the springs and the inner plate, the rivets, the gear, it's identical on the outside. So let's see why they changed the part number on this. We've already got the top plate drilled out so we can remove it. Again, this is the same plate as before. This was an improvement made in 2014, a little bit stronger top plate than the previous generation. Springs are all the same. I did measure the spring diameter and outside diameter and all that, all the same. It's your first stage white spring here, second stage orange springs, and third stage red springs. So those are all the same. Now in 2018, Suzuki decided to machine this gear surface a little bit different on the other side, or the bearing surface, thrust surface, and on this side they made a change to the Belleville washers. But here's the change for the part number. These are your Belleville washers or Belleville springs. They're conical in shape, and when the top plate is compressed, it compresses these and it keeps the basket and the steel gear pressed together so they function properly. Here's a new set out of a conventional basket, and you can see the difference. The inside serrations are not there. A little different color, a little different temper or something, I'm not sure. But that's the only difference in them. And both styles from 2018 and up have this inner hardened washer. They machine the gear a little bit lower to allow room for this. Now this hardened washer actually improves the wear on these. What was happening in some of the older units when when the bearings got really worn in them, where this set against the steel gears, you can see the silver here, the wear, it was wearing into that spring on the bottom, and they all wear just a little bit on the top where they sit on the top plate. Now this is aggravated by wear in the bearing where the gear moves back and forth and makes this rub more than it should. But that's the wear that they were trying to help. Maybe it did help a little bit when they went to the hardened washer, but why they went to this different Belleville spring, I'm not sure. It may be more generic and it may be cheaper due to not having the serrations. It may work just fine, but that so far is the only change that I can document in them. The gear is all the same. We raise that up, we can see the machine surface on the bearing. This before was turned, but it was a rough finish. Here they've undercut the inside diameter and they've ground this. Instead of just tooling it, it's been ground to a decent finish. It's a good finish, but not mirror polished by any measure. For whatever reason, this diameter is a few thousandths larger than the other ones, and I assume that had something to do with knowing they were going to grind it instead, so they left a little bit more meat on it to do that. So this is a little bit larger diameter by about 3 thousandths, I think it was. Not a significant change, just to facilitate how they were finishing that up. The inner plate is all the same casting number, 05G47. Basket's all the same, we've documented that. So the only change is in the Belleville springs. And for those that wonder, that's been mentioned by some that the 2018 basket may be a permanent fix for the chudder and vibration issues these baskets are known for. But as we can see with this brand new plate, it already has play in it. It's not a tight fit, and my experience with these tells me that that will get to be looser and looser and looser as time goes by, and that's where these baskets start degrading and going downhill. I've seen them come around, they'll move so far that they hit the stop plate here. When they're doing that, the basket's out of control. You've got heavy chudder, other vibrations. Now the bearing is also a problem in these baskets in that it wears more than it should. It tends to egg shape. Now this is a pretty good fit for a factory bearing, but even when it's in place, there is some play. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's some slight play in it. These are running 5 to 6 thousandths clearance. I usually run mine about 4, a little bit tighter. Because this is a narrower finish right here, there's not as much room for the bearings to run on this, which isn't a problem on the factory basket because they have a very narrow bearing face. This right here is not machined. It's just a rough casting. You can feel some imperfections in it with your finger. They do not machine that. And then they chamfer the edges of it heavily, so there's a very narrow actual bearing surface there. When we modify these baskets, we use a bronze 660 bushing in there, and when it's final honed to size, we put a smaller chamfer in it to give more support to the gear. Now these, with the different part number, I can see why they justified the different part number, but really it's not a change worth noting. There is no difference in durability or longevity or noise or problems like that. The 2018 and up are not really any better that I've seen. I've already worked on a couple of them than the previous models. The 2014 up series baskets are a little tighter as how this plate fits in from day one, but once it gets a little bit of slack in it, a little more than this, it starts wearing just like the other ones, because when the pistons are firing, it's causing this thing to go back and forth and embed itself into that soft aluminum. Over time, it does that far enough to where the springs are actually hitting the aluminum instead of the steel plate, and once the springs start embedding in the aluminum, they've got such a long distance of travel between on and off that it's like swinging a hammer. When it does take up the slack, it's a hard hit instead of a soft compression, and that's the problem, the root problem in these baskets. So did Suzuki fix the Chudder issues in the new baskets? No, they have not.